Good afternoon and welcome to the third series of Let's Talk Poultry. My name is Rebecca Tierney and I'm the Poultry Advisor here with Teagasc. The webinar is aimed to deliver relevant and up-to-date information to all of our poultry producers across Ireland. Today we're looking at the SSRH, the support scheme for renewable heat. I'm delighted to be joined today by Ray Langton and Denis Neary of SEAI and also Martin Dempsey, a commercial grower, broiler grower from County Mayo. I'm joined also by my colleague Louise Clark as my second in command. Ray and Denis are going to give us the background to what the SSRH is, how to apply, and the process throughout. I'm then going to discuss with Martin his experience of the SSRH on his farm to date. So just to give you a run through of what will be happening over the next few weeks of the webinar, on July 14th, Robbie Hagwood will join me to look at the importance of good flock recording and how it can ensure that the farm is performing to its optimum. Ellie Radford from Humafarva and Callum Turner from St. David's Poultry Team will also speak to us on Coxie on, I think that's July 28th. And they'll look at how best to prevent Coxie, its impact on production, the clean out following an outbreak. And finally, Conor Sheehy will return to us to speak on footpad dermatitis, how it occurs, how best to manage it, and why that is important to us. So I just want to let you all know that these webinars are going to be recorded and they'll be available to view on the Teagasc website along with the presentations. I want to draw your attention to the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. This is a fantastic opportunity for you to put questions to Ray, Denis and Martin on this scheme, and we'll endeavour to answer those at the end of today's presentations. I just want to give a quick update on the current AILT situation. So as of the 25th of June, there were 3 cases of AILT in County Monaghan, 2 cases in the table egg production sector and 1 in the broiler production sector. So from the Department of Agriculture and from myself, the key messages remain to be vigilant, remain very strict on your biosecurity measures, make sure you carry out effective cleaning and disinfecting on any shared equipment, transport, and for any labour to ensure that they use the correct PPE and where possible to avoid sharing labour. And if you have any questions or concerns, to contact a poultry specialist veterinary practitioner and to bring them to the light of the situation. So before we begin, I just want to remind our producers of that ongoing threat and to kind of make us all very conscious of it. I'm just going to share a quick video that has been produced by Teagasc. So we'll all just watch this short video.
Hello there and welcome to this Teagasc information video. Poultry is an affordable, convenient, lean and tasty meat. It has a light carbon footprint. Chickens are extremely efficient at converting feed into meat protein. Poultry farmers are responsible for the health and welfare of their birds and for producing chicken meat that is safe to eat. These objectives are reliant on keeping bird and human pathogens out of the flock. This is best achieved using good biosecurity. However, while in theory biosecurity may be straightforward, achieving it in practice can be very difficult, a situation compounded by complicated and sometimes confusing requirements. Our task in this short training video is to simplify the biosecurity process. Based on Irish and international research and the odd chat with our farmers, we asked ourselves, what biosecurity practices, if implemented across all Irish broiler farms, would have the greatest impact in terms of keeping the bad bugs away from our flocks? In the event, we came up with 8, and here they are. The poultry house should be structurally sound and well maintained, with an access lane dedicated to the poultry site, with no contact with any other livestock or machinery. There should be no animals, for example, cattle, pigs, sheep, dogs, cats, etc., in close proximity to the poultry houses. Rodents and insects should be controlled and access to the house prevented. Have a few well-trained staff. They should be the only ones allowed to enter the broiler house, except when harvesting. Boots should be disinfected before entering the anteroom. The apron around the house must be kept clean, and the area adjacent to the house entrance should be cleaned and disinfected regularly, including after populating and emptying the house. There should be an anteroom containing an effective hygiene barrier between the dirty zone, which is the area between the door and the hygiene barrier, and the clean zone, which is the area inside the hygiene barrier. Outdoor footwear should be left outside the house and dedicated used footwear in the anteroom area. A second change to house-specific footwear is required in the broiler area. Use broiler house-specific gear, meaning colour-coded boots, overalls, tools, etc. Wash hands in warm soapy water and place bedding that is required for the entire flock's production in the house immediately before the chicks arrive. Disposable gloves and/or hand sanitizers should be provided at the entry door at each house. Water supplies should be chlorinated or acidified and Campylobacter free and should be tested at least 4 times per year for E. coli. Avoid drinkers that allow standing water, with nipples but no cups. Drinkers and feeders should be effectively cleaned and disinfected between flocks, including regular microbiology testing. All houses must be tested for Campylobacter before placement, especially if the previous flock was positive. And finally, ensure catchers do not compromise biosecurity during thinning and allow at least 5 days downtime when the broiler house is empty between flocks. So that's it. If you have any questions or comments, you can visit our website at teagasc.ie.
Perfect. So that just highlights, the pretty simple and straightforward steps that we can take to protect our farms. But as I said last week, you are the farmer, you are the one in charge. The buck stops with you. So don't be afraid to stop a person, ask them where they've been, ask them to carry out the correct controlled biosecurity measures on your farm. And that's the best way to protect your farm. So on that, Ray, I'm going to ask you to turn on your camera and turn off your mic, and we'll begin with your presentation, please.
Great, thanks, Rebecca, and thanks for the invite to your Let's Talk Poultry today. So just getting the system up and running here now. Will I share my screen, or are you using the slides?
So if you share your screen, Ray, that's probably...
Okay, I'll do that now. So just bear with me for 1 second while I get that set up. Share screen. So tell me if you can see it. Can you see the slides?
Not just yet, Ray.
Okay, it should be just coming through now. Can you see it now?
Yeah, so you just want to pop it
Right.
into slideshow mode, and we're good to go.
Very good. System just seems to be responding a little bit slower this morning. Gosh, it's just whatever way I've shared it isn't letting me put it up on the screen.
I think that might be it on the when you go into your slide PowerPoint there again on the bottom of the taskbar.
Yeah, it's just not coming alive for me for some reason.
Yeah, if you click the one on the right, then
You might have to enable content.
Yeah, I see that. I see that down.
you want to shut it down and reopen it, maybe.
Yeah, just bear with me for a second, folks. Sorry about this.
You're all right, no problem. I have your presentation this side, Ray, if you want to let me share it and tell me when to move slides along.
Yeah, we might have to do that, Rebecca. So just 1 second. Yeah, if you could do that for me, that would, I think that would.
No problem at all. I do that this side.
I'm not sure why that is, because it's actually shared a screen already this morning, and we'll see a dialog box here. Now, what do you see on the screen now?
So if you want to try share there. I'll pop up the slides from this side, Ray, and we'll work ahead.
Okay,
Perfect. So I have your slides shared there now, Ray, if you want to tell me when to move along.
great. Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. If that's okay, you
Yeah, that's
drive
no
the bus
problem
as
at all.
well. And apologies, not too sure what happened there, folks. But look, let's move on. And it was nice to see the link across to your previous speaker talking about poultry being low carbon footprint. So here's I suppose an entree for us to reduce it even further. So let's go to the next slide then, Rebecca. And you might have to put yourself on mute, Rebecca, because I think there's a little bit of noise kicked back.
Just 1 second, I'll do that now.
Yeah, and just go back to the first slide. Great. So what is the support scheme for renewable heat? It's a financial incentive to replace fossil fuels. So basically, for all you folk on the call today, if you're using fossil fuels, if you're using LPG, if you're using kerosene, anything like that, this is an opportunity to move away from fossil fuels and to move to renewables. It's targeting a particular size, 1,300 gigawatts of renewable heat per year, which is equivalent to about 120,000 homes, or equivalent to about 3% of our heat footprint. So it's a fairly substantial intervention. It's not going to be the be-all and end-all of all the heat needs in Ireland, but certainly it's a large portion of the heat. And it's an opportunity to, as we said earlier, to significantly reduce carbon footprint. And for agriculture and poultry in particular, who are on the call here today, switching to biomass, it can benefit both the supply chain and deliver direct heat savings. So it's renewable and saving money at the same time. It's open for applications. My colleague Denis is going to take you through the application process in a few moments. But let's move on from there then. Rebecca, to next slide, please. There's actually two elements to the SSRH. We call it a hybrid scheme. So there's grants for heat pumps, or there is what we call operational aid, or a tariff payment for biomass and biogas. I'm not going to talk a lot about the heat pumps here today, just to know that they're there, and perhaps we'll just park them for today. Really, what's of most interest to people in the poultry sector is around using biomass, and for that there's a tariff. It's tiered. In other words, it declines with size, and in essence what it does, it pays for 15 years on a quarterly basis, and it's for biomass heating systems or anaerobic digestion heating systems. And if we go on to the next slide, please, Rebecca. So who can apply and what can you heat? So basically anyone in the commercial, industrial, agricultural, public sector, district heating schemes. So not big companies that are in the ETS, emission trading schemes, and not single domestic, so not individual houses or apartments. So certainly anybody in the poultry sector who are on the call today are eligible. What can you heat under the scheme? Most things. So space heating, that's heating rooms and in hotels or offices, water heating, process heating. There are some exclusions, so such as open spaces or wood fuel drying, or heat used for electricity, and not heat produced for the purposes of SSRH. So if there was never heat used for something before, and just because SSRH is there, we're not interested in generating new heat sources. And it must be produced from an eligible installation. And obviously, because you're going to be paid for the heat that's used, it has to be metered at the point of use. Next slide. So the tariff scheme, and this is the heart of it, really, the tariff table. Obviously, it's paid from renewable heating systems, either existing installations, so existing poultry farms that are using fossil fuel, or new installations or expanded installations that have a counterfactual. When we say counterfactual, What I mean by that is that there is an option. So if there's a poultry farm, for example, being extended, and you have an option to put in kerosene or LPG or biomass, then you are eligible. This tariff table breaks down by size. So the two columns, column 2 and column 3 there, that show the units in megawatt hours. A megawatt hour is that's an energy level. That's how heat is measured. It's measured in megawatt hours or kilowatt hours. And for the first 300, it pays at a rate of 5.66. And then for the next 700, so in other words, from 300 up to 1,000, it pays at a rate of 3.02. You folk are more expert than I am on poultry farms, and they're all different sizes. But a lot of poultry farms that we've seen would tend to come in at the upper level of tier 2, so somewhere in the high single hundreds. Could be bigger, but that's typically where they are. And if we go on to the next slide, you'll see how that tariff table is applied then. So these figures very much just examples. Every installation, every heat use would be different. You'll have different sizes, you'll have different histories of fuel use, you'll have different outputs and so on, different areas to be heated. And you'll have different projects to be done. So in some cases, you might have to replace the whole heating system. In some cases, it might be just replacing the boiler. So this is what I would call a scoping, a back of the envelope, when you do a tot with your heat use as to what might happen on your poultry farm. So the first place to look is probably the second point there, which is your heat use. So get out your fuel bills, get out your kerosene or LPG bills, and you can work out from that relatively easily how much fuel are you using in a year. And that can be converted. There's easy conversion tables. You can either get them on the SEAI website or you can download them on Google that will change the number of litres into typically what is megawatt hours output. Just watch out for the fact that the energy in oil is converted through an efficiency factor. Normally a boiler will convert about roughly 75% or 80% across, but by and large, it's relatively easy to do that tot. That in this case, and as I say, this is just an example, and it doesn't matter whether it's a poultry farm or a hotel, or the same principle applies. So if this particular heat user happens to be 1,100 megawatt hours, so what could they expect from the SSRH? They'd expect, and you can flick between the previous table and this one, the first 300 at 56.6, that gives 16,980. The next 700, so you bank that, and then the next 700 comes in at 30.2, is 21. And then in this case, they're just 100 into the third tier, comes out at 500. So there's a total there of 38,620. That's probably, from our experience, that's probably a bit big for poultry farms, to be honest. So I'm not saying that poultry farms would typically come in at that size. As I said earlier, they're probably more like the high single hundreds, so probably more like 800-900 megawatts, but they can vary and do vary. So the other scoping exercise you need to do for yourself, just to see is this worthwhile? What fuel are you using? So here I've used an example of natural gas, probably the most expensive fossil fuel. If you're using LPG or you're using kerosene, natural gas, the cheapest. So oil or LPG would be a higher figure. You can work out how much the heat pellets would cost you to replace that. In this case, I've added a little extra cost just to be on the conservative side of running a biomass boiler. There's a little bit more handling and so on. And in this case, you tot all that up. This particular example shows a net saving of 23,620. The key thing, and the purpose of putting this slide up, is just to show you how it all hangs together. Do your own figures, get estimates for your own cost of what your project would be, and get estimates for your own heat use and so on. Okay, Rebecca, we'll move on. Yes, so what I've just referred to is what I'd call a scoping exercise. You could do this in the back of an envelope. It's relatively easy. It gives you an idea, is this something that I'm interested in? If it is, you have to move to a more professional stage, and Denis will take us through this. I don't want to steal Denis's thunder, but to go into an application stage, you do need a significant technical input. It's not a simple application process. It's not something you do in 10 minutes or even in an hour or two. There's a lot of technical detail required in a design report. You do need an energy expert to help you with those thoughts. We do need to go through quite an amount of documentation back and forward with SEAI to scope out the application and the project for your size, for your application. And it all hangs out of what we call the design report. So you need a design engineer to produce a design report that goes through the detail of your project. We then move into a letter of offer stage. So after the application has been successful, we will send you an offer, a very specific offer for your size, for your application, for everything that's in the design report. You go away and install it. You come back to us maybe 6-9 months later. We allow a year for it. You come back to us and send us a completion report that gives all the technical details of everything you've done. SEAI will inspect the project, and in essence, checking back to make sure it is the project that we signed off on. And then you go into what we call a payment cycle. So we take your 0 meter reading at inspection stage, and every quarter thereafter, you send us meter readings. And there are ongoing obligations. And in essence, the ongoing obligations are to continue to operate the project and the heat as it should be. So to maintain the boiler, to use the right quality fuel, and to keep the meters up to date and keep everything, as I say, maintained and running as it should on a quarterly basis. Okay, we move on again, Rebecca. So the design, and again, Denis may take you through some of this, but the design is critical. And at the application stage, we talk about the holistic design, not just the design of the heat service itself, but everything that's going to be part of it. So if you're keeping old components, if there's old pipework, heat emitters, what we know as radiators, we need to see drawings of that. We need to know from the design report that it delivers the heat you need, and you'd expect this in a design report, to be honest, because there's no point in putting in a heating system that it isn't fit for purpose. It has to be sized right. We look for historical evidence that the fossil fuels you were using, that's a key part of how we work out the size of your requirement. And we look for receipts that you were on oil or gas or whatever. If there is planning permission involved, we need you to clarify that. So that could be for the business itself. So do you have planning permission for your poultry sheds, and for the new heating system? So for example, if there was a new boiler house being built, there may not be, but if there was, so we ask you 2 questions around planning. Do you have planning for your business itself, and does the new project have any planning implication? We look for evidence of any building regulations that are relevant, and that they are complied with, particularly safety, around the safety side of it, any supplier guidelines around exiting or carbon monoxide monitoring, all that type of thing. And environmental licensing. So environmental licensing, particularly important in the poultry sector. Most of you will operate under an EPA license, Environmental Protection Agency license, and for support under SSRH, we have to make sure with you that the terms of your license allow the biomass to be used, and it's a watch out, guys. I would say be careful on that. People who have licenses often have a clause in them that is specific to the fuel you use, and if you change the fuel you use, it could have licensing implications. Now there is a new, I won't go through it here today, but there is, we hope imminently, a shorter route through for environmental license confirmation, but certainly it's a watch out. Okay, Rebecca, go on again. So as I said, there's sustainability and ongoing obligations. So sustainability around making sure the biomass fuel criteria is sustainable, sourced from the right source, and so on. That if you're using biogas, I didn't go into biogas here today, that has to have come from an AG process. There's fuel quality criteria, and there's air quality standards. And then ongoing obligations around maintaining all those criteria, measuring and reporting, operating and maintaining your plant, right? Because this is a 15-year contract, and it's open to periodic inspection during that 15 years. Okay, Rebecca, next slide. So that's really a whistle-stop run through it. There's a range of opportunities, I suppose, that come out of SSRH, and particularly for poultry. The biomass is probably the most relevant one. There are real financial savings to be made there, and it can benefit the whole supply chain. But do reach out to us. We in SEAI are very happy to help you through the process, and contact us if you have any questions. The system is now open for application. Denis will talk that through with you.
Brilliant. Thanks a million, Ray. Denis, we'll get you to share your screen now if we have no more technical difficulties, hopefully. And we keep going. I'm just conscious of the time. I don't want to be holding anyone up too long.
Let me know when you, hold on. Let me know when you can see it.
Brilliant, Denis. We have your screen there now, so we'll get you put there. Okay. Brilliant. Thanks a million, Denis.
Great, thank God. So I'm going to run through very briefly, because Ray's covered a lot of the basic stuff, or the big holistic stuff to do with the scheme. I've got up the same kind of steps that Ray had earlier on, and as you can see there's a gap in the middle. So I'm going to talk to you today about the scoping side of things, the application, as far as the letter of offer, and then I'm not going to really talk about the installation stage and 5, the completion stage, inspection stage. I'm going to talk a little bit about the payment and ongoing obligations, just to give people an idea of what to expect over the next 15 years. The installation and inspection stage, they're going to be looked after by whoever installs your boiler, or whoever your design engineer is. So to give you an idea of what you've got ahead of you, we're going to talk about the design phase today, and we'll leave the commissioning phase kind of out of it. But there is these 2 very distinct phases. After you get your LOO, it's like the half time in the process. I'm also going to talk a little bit about durations for expectations. Martin, I'm sure, will tell you about his journey. It's a bit longer than most, because Martin was actually the very first poultry project, probably the first project through the SSRH. And as the saying goes, it's the second mouse gets the cheese. But it took longer to do Martin's than it would somebody's today. So in the pre-application stage, that's the opportunity to scope it all out. The one piece of advice I would say there is find a supplier who's going to provide you with what you need. The application stage, you should realistically allow about 3 months. And there's quite a bit of back and forth between the assessors and the applicants. Nobody has ever gotten an application right first time in the SSRH so far, so don't be surprised if you get feedback the first time around. When you get the LOO, you get 1 year to complete your project. And from what I've been hearing in the industry, talking to suppliers, when they put in an order for a new boiler, once they get an LOO, they're often hearing lead times of 4 months. And then you're going to have a certain amount of, once the boiler arrives, the site preparation, installation, and then getting ready for your completion and inspection. So I think 6 months is a realistic period there. For the completion and installation and inspection stage, we need 4 weeks notice. So in order to schedule an inspection, if you feel you're ready for an inspection, you email SSRH, you tell them you're ready to go in 4 weeks time. So allow 2 months between the 4 weeks and the inspection itself. And then any reworks that might need to be done pop up from the inspection, like signage or something else that might be missing. That's as long as there's nothing big like planning permission or something that needs to be resolved. But if these things are identified in the early stages, there is time to redeem them later on. For payment, once you get your start date, and it could, sometimes it's the inspection date, sometimes it's not. But once you get your 0 meter reading date and your 0 meter reading value, a 3-month time period goes by, and then that's your second quarter begins. You read your meter, you send it in to us, and in about 2 weeks after that, you get paid. So that gives us a total duration of about 14 to 15 months. But if you take from step 3, the receipt of the LOO, to actual payment, it's a period of about a year. So I just want that out there so everybody's aware, that that's the kind of duration. If you're borrowing money or something like that, it's good to know roughly what to look for. The pre-application stage and scoping, the most important thing is to find a supplier and a design engineer that suits you. Like I said, go onto our website. This is, if you Google SSRH or SEAI SSRH, it'll bring you directly to this page. If you scroll down the page a little bit, you'll find the application stage documentation. There's 4 declarations there in the middle. Have a look at them, make sure you don't fall foul of any of them. But they're fairly straightforward. If you're in the poultry industry, you should be fine. There's 2 documents as well. There's the tariff scheme operating rules and guidelines, and there's the design report template. If you have a look at both of those, and especially if you're someone who's an industry, a supplier of equipment, or someone who wants to be providing applications for poultry farmers, then you need to read both those documents. The design report template is probably due an update. There's 1 or 2 little changes in there regarding qualifications for different sizes of boilers. But you must read those 2 documents if you're going to be putting in applications for people. On that note, if you do intend to put in applications for people, and I will say that as a poultry farmer, if you pick a supplier that as part of the installation is going to do all your documentation for you, then you don't need to worry about any of this. But if you are considering being someone who's going to put in applications, then when you go onto our website, hit the apply now button. You need to register as a user, and the user type you want to choose is applicant rather than contributor. And so I've skipped over. Ray's covered all the technical and holistic side of things, but I'm going to skip over to the LOO, because the LOO is essentially the important thing about the LOO. Like I said, it's half time in your application process, but no expenditure can take place for the project until after you receive a signed LOO. This is very important because if you do spend money, pay a deposit or something for the boiler, it means that you aren't going to be eligible for SSRH, and it would be a disaster. So bear that in mind, be very clear on that. The letter of offer essentially is a contract. It gives you a year to complete your the project. If your project is particularly large, or if it's completed in stages and you feel that a year isn't going to be enough, you should let us know. We can work with you. Some of the projects that started last year that had difficulties with COVID-19, nursing homes, that kind of stuff, we've given them extensions on their letters of offer. We prefer not to if we can, but if it can't be helped. A project is considered complete. So when the year is up, you don't want to run out of the year, because that's going to be essentially breach of contract. So you have a year to complete it. The project is considered complete when you've submitted all the completion documentation, and that's all your recce certs and all the documentation required for the completion process for inspection. So when they've been submitted to SEAI, you're complete. So the LOO also contains information about your annual heat cap. And I wanted to touch on that as well, because I just found that some applications we've gotten, people are a bit surprised when they get their heat cap. And I'm just going to go through the 2 ways that we calculate them and how you come up with your heat cap, how we come up with your heat cap, I suppose, with the information that you provide. And essentially just breaking down, Ray touched on it earlier on as well, the difference between delivered heat and the primary energy. Fuel purchased is primary energy. And so we can, he was talking earlier on about 100,000 litres of kerosene, if that's what you purchase in a year. Kerosene's calorific value is 10.18 kilowatt hours per litre. So if you have 10,000 litres, it's 100,000 kilowatt hours. So bearing that in mind, when you look at your historic fuel consumption, you can see, say, 94,000 litres of kerosene times 10.18, that gives you 962 megawatt hours in a year. You can roughly estimate what your old boiler efficiency is. If you can see the make model, you can look it up online. So you just multiply the megawatt hours by the efficiency, and that'll tell you what your delivered heat is. And delivered heat is the heat through your meters. And because that's what we're going to be reading, that's what we need the annual heat cap to be in. So like I said, there's two ways for us to do it. We can do it looking back. And if you have an existing site and you have been using kerosene or a fossil fuel for the last couple of years, then this is the way we'll work out your heat cap. We'll ask you for copies of your fuel bills. You'll send them in. We'll work out what you've been consuming, multiply it by the efficiency of your old boiler, and that should give us our heat cap. If you've got a greenfield site and you're going to be projecting forward, we can do that too by the KPI. So the benchmark we have for Ireland and the UK for broiler hens is 1.227 kilowatt hours per broiler. So a site that produces 700,000 broilers per year. So that would be 100,000 birds per cycle for 7 cycles. This is just an example, of course. So they would have 700,000 times 1.227. That'll give you 859 megawatt hours per year. Multiply that by the efficiency of the new boiler, which is usually roughly about 80%. And you would end up with a heat cap of 721.5 megawatt hours per year. Now, 721 megawatts are 21.5 megawatt hours per year. As Ray was saying, when you look at it through the payment table, would come out at about 29,700 euros to the SSRH. So that's, I think, important for everyone to understand when you're doing your scoping to be able to work out exactly what your annual heat cap is going to be. Ongoing obligations was the other thing I wanted to touch on, mostly because I didn't want people to think that it was very arduous. I don't think they're too bad. And as I said, Martin will talk you through his experience as well. Meter reading, when you're reading your meters, we want to see the tags on the meter. So there's an example of 3 tags, one on the temperature sensor and one on each end of the calculator. There's another photograph where the screen is legible and the tags are present. So that's pretty much it. And then you read your meter and you put it onto an Excel spreadsheet, submit that into us along with the photographs, and we'll work. That's pretty much your meters read. So it's not too bad. Fuel invoices. So we recommend you have your Excel spreadsheet, and when you get in your fuel invoices, just jot down the following pieces of information: invoice number, your opening stock for each quarter, or maybe not each quarter, but even your opening stock for each 6-month period, because we ask for it in the 6-month report. So invoice number, quantity and weight. If it's chip, moisture content. If it's pellet, usually the moisture content is fixed. The date and the supplier name, because we need the suppliers to be WFQA are assured. So this is an example of a 6-monthly report. Now, the 6-monthly report is about 2 or 3 pages. They're mostly declarations, but the actual information we're looking for isn't that hard to provide. It's your meter reading at the start of a period, meter reading at closing of a period, your fuel type, opening stock, what you had in the bin on the day that the period began, and what you have in all your deliveries in quantity. And then these two lines, these two last line, the third from the bottom, the second from the bottom, are two calculations. Basically, it's your opening stock, the entire weight of your deliveries minus what you've got left in the bin. So you go in, look at your bin, say there's approximately 10 tons in there. So your estimated remaining fuel will be 10,000 kilograms. And then you multiply one by the other. And when we looked at the previous, the calorific value is worked out, like I said, from the moisture content. And when you have the quantity ton, this is just an Excel that multiplies one by the other, and it gives you your calorific value. Same's done here. Basically, once you know how much weight has gone through, fuel has gone through your boiler for that period, you multiply one by the other, and you should have your calorific value consumed. The annual declarations, it's mostly signatures saying, you know, I'm still maintaining my boiler, I'm still following the rules of the SSRH. But the actual information we need, once again, can be boiled down to this simple image here. Start date, end date for the period, so that's a specific year. And then we've identified quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4, and the meter readings associated with them. And then here we have the birds you produced. So we need to know your production numbers, and we need them backed up by some kind of a document. Maybe it's your Bortbia information or your receipts from a supplier that you've been providing them to, just to show that you've actually produced those numbers. And we divide the number of birds by the heat or the fuel gone through your meter. At the end of the day, you're going to end up with a calculation roughly like this. And it's quite simple enough. So you've got basically the fuel purchased is X number of tons. And this comes back to the example of a producer who produces approximately 700,000 birds in a year. So if there was 100,008, say, birds in each cycle, you would have 4,122 tons of fuel in the year. It seems a bit high. I might have that calculation wrong. But you would end up with a primary heat fuel going through your system of 900,000 kilowatt hours. I think that has too many zeros in it, all right. And the key performance indicator for this particular example is 1.2188 kilowatt hours per bird. The industry benchmark is 1.227. And so we would look at that and say that's roughly perfect. You know, that's exactly where we would expect that number to be. Why is there so much paperwork with the SSRH? And this is the big question. We basically have a sense check system in place for the 15 years that you're going to be in operation. So we know how much fuel you're going to be purchasing because you're going to have invoices. And we know how many chickens you're going to have coming out on the other end because you're going to have receipts. We'll be reading your meter throughout the period in order to pay you. And so we know that 1 ton of wood pellets is approximately 8,400 kilowatt hours of primary energy. Typical system. And we'll know exactly what the efficiency of your system is because we'll be basically taking the fuel and comparing it to what's going through your meters. So let's say that for this example, the efficiency is 80%. So we're going to know we should expect 3,840 kilowatt hours per ton of fuel purchased through your meters. And for that much fuel, we would expect to see about 3,912 birds go through your sheds. So over the 15 years, we're going to know, we'll be aware if there's anything wrong. If we see this very simple comparison, 1 ton of fuel equals 3,912 birds and 3,840 kilowatt hours through the meters, that's it. So that's the thinking behind our processes.
Brilliant. Thanks a million, Denis.
No problem.
That was really good to see exactly how it's worked out and the whole process throughout. So I'll ask you to stop sharing your screen. And Martin, it's your time to shine now. So Martin, I'll just put a few questions to you, I suppose. That's maybe we'll go with a kind of a tic-tac, and we can bring Denis or Ray in as we need to. So Denis, might just get you to pull down your screen there if you don't mind.
Oh, yeah, sorry now.
You're all right.
Okay.
Perfect, Martin. So we'll just get you to. Brilliant, Martin. Perfect. So Martin, Martin's based in Mayo. He's been supplying broilers to Western brands since 1997. He started off with 28,000 birds in one house, and in 2001 built an additional 2 houses, both 35,000 birds. So Martin farms alongside his wife Maria and his daughters Jennifer and Rebecca. I think I got his wife's name right. I hope. So Martin, firstly, I'm just going to ask you to give us kind of an overview of your business and the description of your business and potentially why you looked at a biomass boiler and the SSRH for your business.
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. Well, just a normal poultry farmer in Mayo, supplying Western brands since 1997. Just normal, 7 crops per year. Was always interested in alternative renewable energies all down through the years, and have previous experience with biomass boilers. We have a domestic one on our own house for 10 years. So was always watching out for this scheme to get up and get going, and always intended to get in as soon as it got up and running. So that's the reason, for different reasons, the environment in the chicken house and the carbon footprint, and trying to go carbon neutral and just doing your bit for the environment as well.
Brilliant. So the requirement for heat in the poultry house, obviously, as Ray and Denis have said, is quite large. Ray discussed the kind of a back of the envelope job. Did you carry out something similar to work out, what was your heat requirement and how much you could get from the SSRH in that regard?
Yeah, well, I worked for doing the assessment of was it worth it, and the number side of it. I worked with the people who were installing the boiler for us, biomass engineering, and we looked at the numbers before we decided we'd go ahead with it. And when we did up the numbers, we said, yeah, this scheme is good, and it's worth applying for this. So there is a large heat requirement in the poultry industry. It's one of our biggest costs. So a scheme like this, it's a no-brainer really not to look at it and to see if it can be a benefit.
Definitely, yeah, no, definitely. From previous studies I've done myself, it's about 70% of the cost is attributed to heat. So anything where we can reduce that is excellent, and taking advantage of a scheme like this is great. So for you as the farmer, we've heard Ray and Denis's idea of what the process is. What is it like on the ground as the farmer?
Well, in our case, a couple of us, Martin McAree there, Monaghan as well, we were both early applicants, and that really worked against us too, because it was uncharted territory, and we had never been used of an SEAI application. We've been used of Department of Agriculture applications, TAMS applications, stuff like that, which is very straightforward. Once you get your letter of offer or your application has been received, well, then you're over the line. You go on, you do your work, you have your inspection, you get paid. It's just not that simple with SEAI. It's a lot more complex. There's more to it. So it was a struggle. It was a long road. It was, it was frustrating at times, because the questions just seemed to keep coming and coming. And it really, when Denis, and I call Denis, he's the savior of this scheme, because once he came in, he seemed to just move it on. He really moved it on. And I think, looking at a slide there that Ray put up, the holistic design, like that makes it a lot more simpler now for me looking at it. That wasn't there when we started, but everything is lined out there. What you got to do, your EPA, your planning, make sure you have all these things in order with your engineer, with your design engineer, and it seems to have become a lot more simpler than when we started off. It was we just didn't know what to expect next. You think you've answered all the questions and 10 more were coming, but a lot of it was all repeated, you know. But I think a lot of lessons have been learned, and I'd say applications going forward will be a lot more streamlined.
Yeah, I think definitely what Denis said is true, that the second mouse gets the cheese. So
Yeah.
I suppose you've done the hard work for a lot of our
Well,
poultry producers out there.
He said the letter of offer was half time, but I think we were still in the dressing room tugging out when we got the letter of offer, because it was a long time after.
Long wait from that letter of offer. But
the good thing was we didn't know how far away it was, like, you know.
Yeah, I suppose you were definitely the early adopters, and that meant you were the guinea pigs, shall we say. But as Denis and Ray have outlined, things have progressed, and we've ironed out those cracks. And as Ray alluded to, there is the Kate Stone report, which means that the EPA licensing can be reviewed in a different way through frameworks and potential air modelling. So if anyone wants any more information on that, be sure to contact myself, SEAI, or Sean Finan in the IRBA. So how has the SSRH benefited your business to date, like from the installation, once you got out through all that hard paperwork, all those applications, and now you have that in, how is it benefiting your business?
Well, it's benefiting it in the environment in the house. It's a nicer environment to work in, the biomass heat. The most important one, though, is the financial side of it. The incentive scheme is working. We just got our first payment in March, so it does help with the loan. It pays the loan. There's also money left in for fuel, so it does help you out on your heating costs for sure. And whatever length of time you'll have your loan over, once that gets paid, well, then you have the tariff then to go completely towards your fuel costs, and it's working for us. I think it's an excellent scheme.
Brilliant. It's really good to hear that it is improving the environment. I know it's obviously a financial benefit too, but to hear that it's improving the environment for the birds as we are challenged with
definitely it's a far nicer environment to work in, Rebecca. The birds seem happier, it's fresher, it's not as humid. It's win-win, really, you know.
Yeah, definitely. It's really good to hear that on the animal welfare side of things. I suppose that's potentially something people aren't considering, but from my point of view, I think that's going to become a bigger challenge for our producers. So if you can kill two birds with one stone, it's definitely a benefit. So is there any challenges, though? You know, we've outlined the positives. What are the challenges associated with SSRH? I know with the application process, there's clearly, you know, iron out those cracks, but is there anything else you could say?
Absolutely not so far. Once I'm over the line and my report goes in, I've had no issues at all.
Denis seemed to outline that it was very straightforward to do that report, take send in your meter readings.
Yeah, as Denis said, you know, the amount of wood chip you've bought, the chickens you've killed, every chicken farmer has that information at hand at the end of every crop. So it's straightforward. The hard part is getting into the payment schedule and getting everything done, and after that, then it's send in your readings every quarter and your end of year report. So no, it's nothing to be afraid of. It's
very straightforward. So how is everything working out since the installation? No teething problems, day-to-day operation. How does that manage? Is it?
No, it's fine. These machines are state of the art. Like, you know, with the kind of money they cost, you wouldn't expect any problems. They run themselves. Their quality, well, it all depends on the machine you buy, but you really need to be looking to buy a machine. You look for 15 years. You know, you need to buy a machine that's going to at least stand the test of time, because this is a long contract, and you don't want a machine, you know, going down on you in 5 or 6 years or 7 years. So just be careful, farmers, when you're looking at the machine you're going to buy. Just give it plenty of time and thought, and do your research.
Perfect. And the maintenance of the boiler, do you find it's much more than versus your kerosene boiler previously, or is it the same?
The maintenance really for us is just empty the ash box. You know, that's it. You're in a service contract with your provider, and barring that, it's all you do is just feed it and take the ashes out. That's it.
Perfect. And in terms of feeding it, do you know, is it a lot of work? Is it worth it?
No, not really. Like just have your silo. But well, if you're choosing pellets, that'll be fed from a meal bin. If you're choosing chip, you'll have your feed store. So just have it big enough that you can put enough of chip in there for the crop. It would be ideal. But if not, you know, just I suppose whatever size of a yard you have or a boiler house, but just make sure that you have a 5 or 6 days storage anyway for your boiler, so it's not a daily thing. You'd have to feed it every day. That's just
that makes sense. So just a quick question coming in there, Martin. Can you describe what your heating system is for the poultry house? So
okay, well, it's our boilers are Froling boilers, and our heating system is a Cubo system. Their heat transfers, their fans. They're not what other guys might be familiar with, the Spiroflex, which are pipes along the wall. These are fans that blow the heat out in the center of the house for the chickens.
Okay, perfect. So it's slightly different maybe than what we would see.
Well, a lot of these would have gone in the north, and there would be a few of these systems in the south as well. The Cubo heat transfers.
Perfect. Okay. I think that's bringing us. We're slightly over time. So to finish off, Martin, I just want to ask you your top tips for someone going for this scheme. You know, what would you definitely recommend someone go for it?
Yes.
So long as they've done the initial as back envelope job as Ray and Denis have described. So what would your top tips be?
Well, select a good boiler, one that's going to stand the test of time, and work with your supplier on the application form. That'd be very important. I'd say work with your supplier and a design engineer, and to have as much of, you need to have everything correct before you go spending your money. You don't want, when you have your money spent and you're doing your final inspections, that problems start to arise then. So just do your homework, make sure all your paperwork is in order. You've got your planning, your EPA, which is the most important thing now. And if you're on an EPA site, make sure that your EPA license covers you for doing this work. And just spend a little bit of time with the preparation. And I think that's the best tip I could give. Just do your homework going in.
Brilliant. Ray, you briefly mentioned the Keystone report and the change that has to the EPA license, and you might just briefly describe that for us. You know, just give people an indication that it's potentially not an EPA license review now, but looking at the air modelling in relation to their proximity to towns and rural areas.
Sure, Rebecca. And I won't go through all the details because it's quite complex. But just to say that RBIA, the Irish Bioenergy group, did a huge amount of work with this to pick up with the EPA an easier process. So rather than going through a whole license review, there is basically now an emerging methodology. It's not published yet because the first few applicants are literally engaging with the EPA as we speak, but it will allow an applicant to look at their impact. And when you think of it from an EPA point of view, it's what they're really looking at is air pollution, to be frank. So it asks a series of questions based on your own site, such as distance from residential areas, distance from towns, distance from other boilers that might be in the area, and from that, then you can just it leads you to decide whether or not it's a significant change. And if you get all the right answers to the questions, basically, you can submit that to the EPA, and they will deem it as what they call an insignificant change, which doesn't need a license review. If it doesn't work for you, you can do your a modeling on your own site. That's the next level, and that may still get you an output that it can be deemed as insignificant. And finally, if that doesn't work, you may have to go for full license review. So there's kind of a scale of interventions with the EPA.
Yeah, but it's brilliant to know that, you know, it's not straight away an EPA license review.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's the big breakthrough. And
yeah.
Actually, as I said, there's about 5 clients at the moment knocking on the doors trying to get that system through. And again, hopefully we get those through with the EPA very soon, and that will hopefully ease the journey for other clients coming through.
Yeah, look, I think it's a fantastic scheme, and it's very important to check that it is right for you, whether your broilers, turkey brooding is ideal as well. So take a look at what you're using in terms of heat on your business. Take a look at the tariffs on the graph and see, does it suit you? And be sure to get in contact with SEAI and they can assist with that. So I want to thank Martin, Denis and Ray and Louise for all their time today. Thank you for 3 brilliant presentations. It's made it very clear that it is a brilliant scheme. Had some slight teething problems at the start, but we're through them now and we're good to go. So I just want a final word of advice to just be very mindful of biosecurity at this difficult time as we face an AILT outbreak. This presentation has been recorded and will be available on the Teagasc website along with Denis and Ray's presentations. So thanks again for joining us today, and I hope to see you all on the 14th of July. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Thank you.